Good morning, rest seekers. I am Peggy Norwood Stella, and a few gentle, easy moves I want to offer you today to help stretch the hamstrings, or at least begin to relieve a little tension in that area, in that connecting area between the legs and the upper body. So we know that the hips, we work with them all the time with our gentle easy moves, but we know the hips are a rather large moving piece of the body, and they're moving and fluctuating constantly, even with the motion of the head, the motion of the feet, everything. It's like that big joint in the middle of the body is constantly responding to movement that's going on all around. So it's not just isolate. We're not ever really isolating one place. Whenever you move one thing, the whole system has flux and change, which is why I love teaching these gentle, easy moves, because I love when people make that discovery that, wow, I mean, I was just moving my feet and I felt a release in my shoulders. And it can happen that way. And the way we are achieving rest, when we're looking to find rest for our bodies, we kind of have to begin to address the tension that's present in the body in order for us to physically achieve rest. That state, right, of relaxation, where the tension is simply just enough to hold the body and move the body in space, but not so much that it's constantly draining your energy. So in order to achieve energy balance and for the body to achieve rest, we need to keep introducing these gentle, easy moves all the time to try to find that place of balance and rest in our own bodies. And there's so many ways into that, and you just have to determine what that is for you, for your body. Now, don't think necessarily that just because this is what I'm doing and we're doing hamstring stretches that this is something you absolutely, have to include in your exercise schedule. And instead, it's just another way for me to introduce, or as I'm saying, an entry into relaxing the body and achieving rest. There's just, like I said, there's so many avenues that we can choose to find that in the body. So we're just exploring movement in every way we can. I encourage you to do that, to just explore movement and see how it feels for you and how your body responds. So we're not coming from a place of trying to force a movement onto the body, but instead we are coming with the attitude of kindness. We're coming from an approach that's asking the body how it's feeling. So we're not just saying we're going to do this move. We're going, let's try this kind of movement and see how it's feeling. And if the body says nope, then we pay attention to that. If you're having pain and discomfort, that's a sign and signal from your body that something needs to be addressed. And it's very interesting. So, because sometimes the pain and discomfort is not the area where the greatest imbalance has occurred. It's not necessarily an area of injury. It is simply where the signal is showing up. That quite often knee pain may be, for example, indicative that there's not enough motion at the hip joint. See what I'm saying? It's like there's just, again, so many ways. If you've got, if you've got tightness in one part of the body, it doesn't mean you need to go in and force a stretch or force it to move in a different direction. Instead, we're gently coaxing the body, moving other parts of the body, and seeing how it reflects for us, okay? It's like I spend a lot of time talking about this, but I just feel like it's really important that we begin to embrace moving our bodies in a very, from a very different perspective. That we want to approach these gentle, easy moves with the greatest amount of kindness we possibly can. So today, as I'm talking about hamstring stretch, please keep in mind that I'm not speaking in terms of this is an absolute must for you to do, or this is when you do it and how to do it. Instead of just making some suggestions on stretching the hamstrings and how we can actually get a little bit more stretch out of it without necessarily stressing or putting pressure onto the low back. So, I'm going to get started. I've got a mat down and I'm going to be lying down and talking through this just a little bit today. But we're working at that connection between the hip joint and the legs, the upper body and the lower body. And as I've said before, the one muscle that actually does connect the two, right, that connect is the psoas. And the psoas is involved in all of this, so that even when we are sort of targeting the hamstring set, know that the psoas is also playing a role, particularly when I'm talking about movement of the pelvis, movement of the hips. So starting from a lying down position, and what I usually do is I just kind of shift down to what I call my mermaid sit, and then walking myself down. You're not going to get to see my face anymore because I want you to be able to just see the action around the hips if you possibly can. So now we're just going to be exploring the connection again between upper body and lower body. And one way I'm going to do this is just very simply, just lift one leg from the floor, just lift one and just grab that knee and see if you can just touch that knee and gently, this isn't a force, but just kind of gently move just kind of gently move it about. Just give that a little, just like a little warm up. And I want you to feel, as that leg moves around, feel the contact to the floor underneath you. So where your buttocks, where the bum is contacting the floor, the pressure is going to change when you lift that leg. You're going to feel the difference. So just play around with that just a little bit. Good, and then just let it go. Just place that back down. Let's go to the other leg. Gently lift. And I'm keeping the foot relaxed right now. I just want you to play around with that leg. And feel that as you're moving the leg, that you are also getting a change in your contact with the floor. And that's telling you that, that the hips are responding to that movement. You're getting a little bit of movement in the hips, and you can just play around with it a little bit. Good, and even, believe it or not, even just this tiny little motion may be just enough to coax the body into a more relaxed state. And put that down. And just now feel again, feel feel the connection to the floor. Let gravity and the weight of the body sort of be an indicator of where you are. So you're going to be using that, you know, this as some signals from the floor into your body. Where's the motion going? Now, let's go back to that again, and let's bring up one knee and then bring up the other knee. So now we've got both feet off of the floor. And I want you to, as you bring those knees closer to you, I want you to feel how the pelvis, how the hips are going to rock back with the legs. So do you feel the hips rocking back with the legs? And this means that the low back or lumbar area is actually opening up just a little bit underneath you as it moves towards the floor. So there's just a tiny little bit of flexion there. So we don't want to overdo that. We just want to do that tiny little bit. You can feel just a little bit of motion in the tailbone and in the hips. You can roll it if you want. Now go ahead and roll a little bit, and I find that actually kind of opens up the low back a little bit. Feels good. Bring it right back to center, and then put one leg down and then the other leg down. Good. And now notice if you feel any difference. Now for me, what I'm feeling right now is I feel a little bit more openness in the lumbar area. I don't have quite, I feel almost like a little airiness there because I've just opened up and moved the hips down and away. So rather than being close in, I feel like that just a tiny little bit of opening up of the hips from the rib cage. And I can feel that difference. That's for me. So again, you may feel something completely different, and that is okay. We are observing more than anything. We're just observing how the body responds. Okay. So now that we've played with that, you realize that when I had the leg bent and bringing it, and you were bringing it closer in, you realize that the hip is following that motion. And that means, and then now I'm going to talk biomechanics. The mechanics of that move means that the hamstring was probably not very involved in that at all. That instead you were actually getting just a little bit of mechanical opening, mechanical right from here to here, but the hamstring wasn't really getting any kind of a stretch there. Now let's again, we're going to talk anatomy. The hamstring stretches over the knee joint. It actually also stretches through, right across the hip joint. So that's why when we were pulling like that, right, with this connection behind, right in the hip, you were actually getting some movement there. But I said, like, the hamstring's not really acting very much. We were passively moving through that. So now let's just do a little bit of passive work again. And I'm going to, if you've got a towel available, so you're going to use a towel. Some people you can use your hands to do this, but I just place a towel behind my thigh and put the foot right back on the floor. So if you can see that really well, right? Got the towel here, got it around the thigh. Now I'm going to engage my foot by lifting the toes and ball of the foot from the floor and leave the heel in contact with the floor. And then we're going to just passively lift the leg and now extend. So you're going to, but the foot is flexed, right? The foot is flexed, so the toes are reaching back towards your knee. And now we're going to play with the connection at the hip. So as you open up
right, as you open up the angle at the knee joint, you are going to perhaps feel movement in the hips, movement of the pelvis underneath you as you open up the hamstring. Now, I have more flexible hamstrings, which means that I can get the leg into an extended position and still maintain neutrality at the hip. For some of you, you may actually only get just a slight, like just slightly above this parallel to the floor with the lower leg, and you're going to start feeling the change down into the hip. So let's just release that for a moment, let it relax, put the foot back down if you want to, just let it relax. We can even move over to we're going to move over to the other leg and try the same thing. And just feel what's going on. We're exploring connections at the same time as we were working on lengthening the hamstring. So I'm going to take my towel, I'm going to put it underneath the other leg. And again, we're just going to hold it right there, nice and easy. And then flex the foot. So lift the toes and the ball of the foot and leave the heel in contact. And then passively lift the thigh to perpendicular to the floor. So you've got, it might have a little bit of play in that, lifting the thigh perpendicular from the floor. You can see I'm just kind of holding the weight of the leg there. And now with the flexed foot, I'm reaching up towards the ceiling. You're going to find, because I know, like again, I know for myself, I don't have quite as much flexibility on this side as I do on the other. And I'm feeling the stretch down into, right, the back of the hip, into the buttock with this side more so than I did on the other side. And we just play with that. And again, we're not forcing a stretch. We're just seeing, where does the leg go and what are you feeling, not just in the stretch behind the knee, but also down across the back, in the buttocks, right? Feeling that stretch as well. Deep into the hip joint, you'll feel it. Good. And now very gently just kind of let that go, let it relax, and put that foot back down. And feel right now, just kind of take a check and see what you feel in that connection, any difference from where it was before. See how that feels for you. Let's go back and let's do the other side again. So placing the towel right behind the thigh. And remember, this is a passive lift, so we're going to flex the foot, heel down, keep the heel in contact. Now bring it up so that the thigh is perpendicular to the floor, so it's not drawn in. We're trying to keep the hip in neutral here. All right, and here we go. Let's keep that leg perpendicular. And now the lower leg, the heel reaches up towards the ceiling. And just feel, you may feel the stretch through the back, in the back of the thigh. You may feel it down the hip. You may feel it behind the knee. And just gently, again, gently find the place. We're going to, not necessarily our limit, we're just exploring that motion, but we're keeping the hip still. You'll see that you can get a little bit of motion in the leg without that movement in the pelvis that we felt earlier in that move. When the knee was bent and we were bringing the knee back, we could really feel that connection in the hip. This one we are trying to, right, we are exploring a different connection. Right now the leg is extended as best you can, and we're seeing if we can actually keep neutrality at the hip. Because what happens, let me go ahead and put this back down. What actually happens is sometimes when I see people stretching their hamstrings is that they get the leg into that straightened position, and then bring that leg as far back as they can towards their face, and the hips are like lifted from the floor. It's putting a lot of strain, one, on the low back, but two, it has ceased really to stretch the hamstring. The hamstring gets to a point of stretch, and then it's putting more of a strain in other parts of the body. So I'll show you what, I don't want to put you into that position, but I'm going to encourage you to think about that, like not putting that strain into the rest of the body, but just playing with this stretch instead. So, okay, I've got the other thigh. I'm going to lift the ball of the foot and toes so the foot is flexed, resting on the heel, and now passively lift that leg so that you've got the thigh perpendicular to the floor. The hip is in neutral, so you've got that tiny little bit of play. And now stretching, good. Now just reaching the heel up towards the ceiling, wherever that's going to go for you, and still being able to maintain a little bit of play without the hip following. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you something that I'm not going to ask you to do it, but I'm going to see that a lot of times I'll see people bringing it back and the hip lifts off of the floor. And even though I'm stretching my hamstring, I'm also putting some strain on the low back here that's not necessary. And instead, what we're really trying to do is to pay attention to this connection between the leg and the upper body. And see if we can relax, because this, if you can get that little bit of play without moving the hip, it's telling us, right, that we've got the psoas that's actually kind of being able to be impacted as well. So there we go with that nice gentle stretch of the hamstring. You can play with it, but important to remember, you don't want to have that stiff connection between the leg and the upper body. We want a little bit of play through there. And now I'm going to just place that heel down, place the foot down. And now go ahead and extend the legs. So we're just going to extend the legs beneath us. And now reach out through the heel. Ooh, there we go. Now this is to me, this is like the juicy part. That when I reaching out through the heel, I'm really feeling this openness that's creating here. So I want you to now just move the legs, wiggle the legs around in the socket. Very good. And that's all we need to kind of do today. We're just playing around with that connection between the leg and the hip, lower body, upper body, and being able to separate the motion of the legs from the upper body, not being locked in at the pelvis, is going to translate into so much more possibility for you. I'm coming back up. I know I work with a lot of, I do work with people who ride horses, in that what I'm talking about is that connection or that play in between the legs and the hips. Really important. If you're locked in at the pelvis, there's just a lot of motion, things that you're going to miss in the connection even with the horse. It's also true in dancers, that I've worked with dancers. The same kind of thing is true, that if there's some locking in at the pelvis, there's locking in with motion all over the body, so that you can't produce the subtle shifts and changes in other parts of the body, or the performance in other parts of the body when you're locked in at the pelvis.
But I think most importantly, as I'm talking to people who may be riding horses or working around horses, and realizing that that locking in at the pelvis, that may be also blocking some of your own range of motion, which means you've got some work to do in your own body. That our blocks in motion are also going to impact the animal that we're working with. So I find that that's a really important point that I'd like to make. So when we are tense in our own bodies, we can transfer that. So we're impacted by it, but if you're in contact with other beings, they're impacted by it as well. So what I'm trying to do with gentle, easy moves is just to be able to bring a more to bring relaxation and rest into the individual, and make you really aware of that, making you really aware of the fact that how movement in your body truly impacts the whole system. And because we really just can't separate out mind, body, spirit, it's you totally that gets the message. It's you totally that gets a transformation. So that when we are playing around just with motion of the hamstrings, you can see how it can go. It's just like, boop, it goes out to the whole world. Because when we're working on finding our own place of center, it impacts everything. So hopefully I'm getting a little, I know I'm getting a little bit deep with my gentle, easy moves, but I just want to make you aware that this isn't about necessarily, improving your flexibility of your hamstrings. This is about exploring that motion and allowing your body to achieve a little higher level of performance from just a really subtle shift and change. Okay? I'm so glad that some of you were able to join me here today and join me live. If you're catching me on the replay, please let me know that you did that too. And share with me, if you wouldn't mind, in the comments, once you've tried this movement, how is it feeling for you in your body, or what are you going to find? What difference will you find from just that small, subtle movement? What difference are you going to find as you get up from the floor, walk away, and go about your day to day? You'll be surprised at sometimes how these really tiny, subtle differences in our awareness are going to show up in different places. So just let me know about that. I'm glad you joined me here today. It's amazing. It took a half an hour to do a couple of stretches, but I think it's just really, really important for me to be able to teach a little bit about what that meaning is for all of us. So thanks for joining me here today in Rest Seekers, and I'll look forward to hearing how it's going for you. Bye.